Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Julie Moon. I'm Senior Research Analyst with Finovate, and you are tuned in to today's webinar, Transforming Financial Services, Innovations in AI-Powered Observability. Now, we're going to be bringing you a panel discussion during today's webinar, and with me on the virtual stage, I have Wayne Seeger, Field CTO at Dynatrace, Paul Barnhill, Managing Director at Deloitte, and Eric Barron, Principal Segment Leader, DevOps, Global Financial Services at AWS. So during this session, you'll see a demo of Dynatrace's technology, hear why observability is essential for financial services firms today, and you'll also learn about how AI is impacting the space. Now we're going to be spending about 40 minutes for our discussion, as well as the demo, and we will be allowing for questions at the end. We'll have about 5 minutes at the end to address your questions. So throughout the presentation, as you think of questions, please enter them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and my panelists will do their best to address your questions at the end. So to kick things off, we're going to start with a warm-up question to warm up the conversation here. We're going to do a rapid-fire question to set the stage. So I'd like each panelist to share one major trend that you're seeing in financial services related to cloud adoption and observability. Paul, let's start with you.
Great. Thank you, Julie. Yes, I think I'm going to sort of cheat a little bit and say there's kind of two elements or two factors that I see in terms of our clients, the financial services sector, that are really driving observability and AI ops. The first is sort of customer expectations, the always on, ability to always on services. And in conjunction or sort of, driving against that is complexity of IT environments. We've got hybrid cloud, we've got containers, we've got multiple layers of abstraction, and we have distributed everything. And so as clients are starting to scale out these new technologies and try to keep it up and try to keep it reliable and resilient is really a challenge for a lot of our clients. And we find that observability is a real key to helping our clients with that problem.
All right, Wayne, over to you.
Yeah, I would say, kind of really one main thing, which is acceleration, meaning moving things quickly to the cloud and effectively. So that trend, which has been around for a little while, is continuing, and the gas is still getting pressed pretty hard. And then the second thing I would say is around unification. This particularly when we talk about observability is over time, there has been a trend of data being siloed and in multiple places, which doesn't lend very well to efficiency. And so we're starting to see that as a real key topic.
Great. And Eric? Eric, I think you might be on mute there.
Boy, already strike one in this wonderful webinar. I apologize, folks. So coming back into global financial services, having been in AWS and actually at Microsoft, kind of in the rise of the Azure AWS waves, and specifically AWS within the public sector space, where the global financials really are in the spot where it's not an if, but a when and how quick. The last industries to really make that jump. And what we've seen as a key trend is, just like my colleagues here articulated, there are very much multiple layers of kind of the cloud ecosystem that are being leveraged, whether it's on-prem clouds that have been developed, whether it's multi-cloud implementations that are being evaluated. And what we get the exciting ability to do with these customers is really come in and show them not just how to take advantage of cloud services, but really take advantage of third-party platforms and service teams like Deloitte and Dynatrace that allow us to look at how can we be driving the most impactful workloads out to the cloud backend. How do we derive refactoring in those workloads to constantly build a flywheel of value-based consumption within those teams? How do we build so that other teams are able to consume as they drive their migration process? And how do we use observability to watch where we actually see the the ways that we can enhance those workloads as they moved over to the cloud backend, but also really take the information that's coming from the developers and the pipelines that are actually being established and feed that into my observability layer to do things like shortening mean time to resolution and drastically reduce the impact of the different types of CAB reviews. And they've been really the critical trends we've seen so far. And it's been fun working with clients in that.
Great. All right. Thanks, everyone, for those. Now we're going to start with Wayne here. Wayne, can you expand on why observability is essential for financial services organizations today and beyond just ensuring system availability?
Yeah, exactly. So historically, people would go and say observability, or historically we call it monitoring, is just up and down, fast or slow. Is it available? And that's about that was what people kind of basically went with. I think now we're really hitting the trend, and particularly when we talk about financial services, although it is many other industries, is you're, like Paul always said, you're always on, right? Transactions are happening all the time. It's not a 9 to 5 and there's off hours on weekends. And so you need to have full visibility into everything all the time. And when there could be problems at any hour of the night, any day of the week. And so that's one of the main things. But where we also look at it is the speed and acceleration that these industries are starting to really try to move at. Historically, financial services were always thought of as kind of being, a bit laggards or maybe moving a little bit slower in the technology world. That is absolutely not the case anymore. And so you need to really have a full observability and full visibility across all of your systems in order to be able to achieve that level of speed without having the customer impact, which you certainly don't want. And so those are really some of the main areas I see, and really where we're also seeing this become much more pronounced is starting to utilize some of the data the rich data you can get out of actual observability and start using that in some of your business decisions. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about this a little bit later, so that's kind of a bit of a teaser, but those are really some of the main areas I'm seeing where particularly the financial services are really essential to having to utilize a unified observability platform.
Great. All right. So to kind of dovetail off of that and dig into that, I'm going to open this question up to the floor. So, as you mentioned, observability, it's often seen as a technical requirement, but how can companies make that case for its business value? Paul, let's start with you on this one.
It's interesting. I've had a lot of clients, not so much in the financial services area, but outside, where they're really challenged with making, the ROI case for observability for various and sundry reasons. In many cases, it's sometimes perceived cheaper to just have a set of eyeballs looking at a dashboard and simply just having them sit there and sort of react to a dumb alert. But, the reality is there's lots of, financial benefits and business benefits for adopting a really comprehensive observability strategy. I really sort of advise clients, if you have a reliability and resiliency program, definitely latch onto that. That is definitely an area where you can sort of grow. And, even though they may be looking at architecture and reliability of their systems from a design and from an implement and deployment perspective, observability really is key in terms of measuring that and also making sure that you have sort of proactive or preventative, alerts and predictive analysis using AI to sort of anticipate when those systems may go down, because reality is they are going to go down. So tying that to your reliability and resiliency program is key. Also, I would say, look at how you're going to be reducing costs, right? Your mean time to discovery and detection is going to go down, presumably either by avoiding an actual issue, by addressing the issue before it becomes customer facing, or you're going to shorten the life cycle to actually get it remediated, because you're going to have a depth of rich telemetry data at your fingertips to quickly identify, isolate, and implement a solution. I would say, the next area is sort of think about how it can help you with your compliance and your risk management areas. You can, audit a lot of your activities within your SDLC and in your production issues in terms of, tracking that in terms of from the design phase all the way through change management, all the way to production. That can all be monitored through observability and actually, measured and sort of, audited for compliance purposes. And then lastly, I would say it can help drive your decisions, right? I like to sort of lump FinOps into this category of observability because at the end of the day, you're extracting, telemetry data on your financials and you sort of optimize your utilization of your environment. And FinOps is a great way to sort of facilitate decision-making in that category. So those are the 4 or 5 areas that I would say, leveraging, observability and latching on to those initiatives within your organization will definitely demonstrate business value.
Great, yeah. Eric or Wayne, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, Paul, you're spot on, right? The bucketing of, again, back to this not if, but when and how quickly. The reason these banks and these financial services companies are making this move is because as these different types of startups have grown and really kind of lean into that Mark Andreessen paper of software is eating the world, which I know we are all familiar with in the industry, it could be more the banks are truly making these types of decisions to take advantage of cloud, to gain that level of agility, to gain that level of elasticity. But it's really, really important that these types of notions around resiliency, governance, and compliance that quite candidly are not just job zero, but like the most mission critical elements to the way these banks need to operate for every reason under the sun. As we see this rise of more and more different types of software assets being the way that we can form and create new lines of business, both to guard against our existing properties, but also to create these new features, enhancements, and ways to touch consumers. The ability to do that quickly is absolutely critical. Baking in that compliance and risk is probably the most important facet that we can deliver for our customers as they're going on this journey. And I don't need to talk to any of you, because it's just the world we live in, that the rise of AI or different types of AI implementations are creating an even newer set of features and ways that we can interact with these customers. And our ability to not just enforce that, but monitor and watch, how are those features performing? How are we guarding against and ensuring posture, compliance, and governance into how those different types of workloads are running? And then also using the information to Paul's point of really helping us optimize how we are in back-end compute to power those services. Really, when we think about observability, it's the most critical vector that we have to really gain that level of insight. And many of my clients are moving down that path and realizing that this isn't just something that is nice to have, but is mission critical to the success of how we are driving this level of transformation.
Yeah, great. All right. And Wayne, any thoughts on the case for business value?
Yeah, I mean, I think, certainly Paul and Eric did a great job of articulating it. I think the last thing that I'll add is just when I talk to different, CIOs and different CTOs in different industries, particularly one of the things that they're still missing, or they don't have let's say a great view all the time on, is a lot of those key business KPIs that the technology is, of course, feeding, or that's running on the technology components. They don't necessarily have a real-time view of certain things. So think about a critical business process in the in the financial services of account opening. Everybody needs to do it, but there's a million different steps that happen, different third parties that are involved, that need to be accountable for the success of that. And ultimately that comes back to the actual business that the institution's trying to gain, but also the customer's experience that's, let's say, trying to open the account in this case. And so in the observability world, yes, we've historically always tracked the availability of those systems, but now we can really give you a full holistic view using all that information from end to end, from when the customer basically came to your digital endpoint, decided to open the account, put their information in, to the point of where they potentially even receive their credit or debit card, and actually get that full flow in real time. That's the key, and see if there's where things can be improved. And that's a view or a visual more and more C-levels are really looking to get, because that's a way that they can optimize their processes and ultimately generate more revenue for the industry.
Yeah. Okay, so I'd like to move over to Eric now. Eric, when we look at the AWS customer base in financial services, what are some of the most common obstacles that you're seeing in accelerating cloud adoption?
I'm going to ask you all to stick with me here on kind of a silly analogy without showing the shared responsibility model. I mean, that's almost part of the job description. But I think the thing that's important there is what that responsibility model really stipulates is when we're moving these workloads over, when we manage the back-end infrastructure of AWS, we are building in that level of compliance and governance for our customers to take advantage of. Obviously, all of that is job zero. But when we look at what the workloads are going to be using to run on top, there's a lot of compliance nuance that goes into how we inject that level of posture that we need, both at development time, at runtime. And if we unpack that, think about as my clients are moving these workloads over into a backend like AWS and really driving that transformation, we really need to be cognizant of the way the CISO office, who's responsible for that audit, to reproduce what went into those releases. That's a really difficult problem to solve for most of these complex financial services organizations. The reason for it is because they've grown up with so many different platforms, so many different languages, and then so many different types of development tooling infrastructure. And for an auditor, the real thing that we have heard quite a bit about in engaging is this notion of software supply chain and bill of materials that's going into these releases. When we look at that problem for our customers, the level of granularity that our customers are needing to deal with in that audit would be analogous to the following. Famous Amos Cookies is a massive, obviously, operation. You can go into probably any one of your local vending machines and pull one of those out. They're delicious. If we look at how those cookies are produced at scale, right, and all of the ingredients that go into each of the individual things that are coming off the line, that are getting put into those bags, putting into shipping containers, and then being distributed all over the world. When I go into that vending machine and pull the cookie bag out, the auditor, the level of granularity that our clients are being asked for, if you parallel the cookie to a software asset that's running in a cloud platform, and all the variables that stipulate how that cloud platform needs to run. It's literally on the hook for pulling one of those cookies out of the package, and that person coming to me and saying, prove to me that cookie doesn't have salmonella. Think about what I would need to go through to go back in the process to try to make sure that that was true. So when we look at the common ways that these teams are looking to derive that level of auditability that I then can feed into my runtime to protect myself, to observe in the assurance that I'm following that posture. We really need to look at what happens on the left side of the development groups. And we have been working or trying to piece together or build those software assets and build the back-end building blocks in AWS that are supporting those different types of workloads that they're moving across. And the better we can help customers get, building those types of Lego books that exist, that different types of communities of practice that have created to show customers through the last 20 plus years of how to take advantage of a platform like AWS in that value-based way, delivering on agility, effectively assuring compliance, and driving down cost optimization. When I can feed that information into a runtime observability layer, protection against financial controls, compliance controls that I need to adhere to, but I can see it at real time. And my ability to aggregate that information and get better at feeding and breaking down the data silos that exist on the left side of that coin and moving them into runtime and watching against gives so much benefit in financial impact, in actually enhancing compliance posture and helping customers shorten mean time to resolution when issues arise.
Great. Yeah, that compliance piece is huge, especially in today's day and age. So, Paul, I'm going to turn to you now. As managing director at Deloitte, what trends are you seeing when it comes to integrating observability into financial services companies' cloud initiatives?
Well, I obviously see lots of trends, but I think the one that I want to share with everyone today is working with an insurance company which used and leveraged observability to help with their cloud migration initiative. The client was really sort of, a legacy system, a lot of AIX, a lot of middleware, and sort of identifying actually what systems interdependencies they had was a real challenge, right? So what we proposed and did with them was basically instrument their environment and sort of provide telemetry to actually identify those interdependencies in a live environment, not in a test or based on paper, but real live environment. Run that for a time and sort of understand what systems were impacted in terms of various particular customer experiences or customer interactions, what we call critical customer exchanges, right? And sort of identifying what those CCEs are and sort of making sure that we have that end-to-end parity in terms of all those systems are actually instrumented and actually highlighting what those interactions are and which are critical and which are not critical. And that for sort of sets the prioritization of the migration and also sets the order and interdependencies of that migration. But it also highlights the prioritization and also highlights the interdependencies and what potential software packages need to be modernized or refactored, or it could be simply replatformed. And sort of identifying those customer critical interactions along with real-time data was really sort of helping them set out their plan for migrating not only their modern applications but also their legacy applications. So it really helped sort of unlock a logjam that they were having in terms of making basic decisions, because they really were perplexed on where to start and how to execute that plan. And observability was really kind of a great way to sort of unlock that decisioning. It also provided sort of knock-on effects of making sure that they had everything in place so they could monitor the experience of the customer through the migration process. So in addition to instrumenting their applications, we established service level objectives and the necessary indices to actually feed into those objectives. And they could monitor based on the objectives how they were doing against that before, during, and after the migration. And hopefully, at the end, they had a reserve budget and had enough to actually, expend going forward. And if they didn't, what did they have to do to actually remediate the issue and focus on that particular migration that was causing a lot of pain for them and also for the clients? So the outcome was basically a more efficient migration strategy planning process. And the knock-on effect was a better experience for the customer and also ultimately a less stressful migration process for everybody involved on the back end. It really had sort of those threefold business benefits. And obviously it had, lower costs of adoption and migration in terms of more efficiencies, more, effective, troubleshooting of incidences as they came about. And now they can now go into the cloud knowing they have full instrumentation and monitoring of their infrastructure. And so, from there, they can only go farther. And we're now helping them with, enhancing their CMDB and other things to rationalize their tools and make sure they have good quality and stability in their sort of what I call shift left observability and introducing performance engineering and other things into their life cycle beyond, the migration. So again, insurance company, great benefits in terms of instrumentation and helping them with their overall migration plan to the cloud.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that example. That's really always helpful to have a real world example there. Now we're going to turn things over. We're going to switch over to a demo. So Wayne, I'm going to let you go ahead and get that started for us and click over there. And we're all going to go on mute so that we're not overheard over the demo.
Yeah, so we're going to pop it over right now. And we can take a look at Dynatrace talking. And, just to give you a sense, some of the things that we're actually going to see is ultimately Dynatrace in action of some of the things that we're describing, some of the problems, and obviously this is some of the solutions for it. So
we've been spending a lot of time talking about how observability is a lot more than just managing your IT systems and managing, are systems up, are they down, are they fast, or are they slow, right? That's historical kind of monitoring ways of going about things. So what we wanted to do is basically take a step deeper into this and actually show you in a bit of a little bit demonstration what we actually mean by that, and actually putting that into practice. So if we take a look here, as I pull up my screen, what we're looking at is a pretty simple kind of standard banking opening account process, something that every financial institution and many other financially adjacent institutions tend to do. But it's very simple to think about. We're going to open up a brand new account, but as you can see, there are many different steps that have to go through for that to happen, many of which involve not only the first-party institutions, the actual bank or the financial institution themselves, their applications, but many third parties. So as we look here, right, the online application piece may be written directly by the bank itself. Many are, right? But then you ultimately have to go through things such as doc review, so that you look at whom the person was, what type of documentation they provided, make sure that's all good. And sometimes that goes out to a third party to do that. In addition to credit checks, sometimes that goes out to one of the major credit bureaus to make sure this person has some credit, and ultimately that we would probably want them as a customer to open up an account. And then maybe it comes back, and after all of those different processes are approved, we would go through and complete the process of creating the account and allowing the user to then transfer in some funds and be able to interact with us as an institution. Now, this is kind of the way, or the historical way people would go about it, is essentially monitoring these IT systems. And that's why we kind of put down here, these have all been kind of more technical things. People have put different levels of infrastructure observability, application observability, ideally going as far as actually measuring the user's experience. But a lot of times things have stopped there historically. But if we really want to up-level this, or kind of go into the next level, is we really want to start, what we should be measuring is the actual business KPIs that come out of this, such as what is that conversion rate? Meaning, our not only are our systems working properly, but are they going through all those different touch points, and are things working efficiently? What's the time that takes for that to happen? Ideally, we want to onboard customers as soon as we can, or as fast as we possibly can. But what's the lag time between when they submit their claim or submit their form to ultimately getting their account approved? And then we can go even further and start to look at things such as the amount of people who maybe start off on the first phase of this, such as entering their information, but never go any further in the process. And maybe why is there a problem, and something we can fix? Because ultimately, if we start to measure these different KPIs from the business level, we then can really tie that back to and how we achieve a lot of the core business outcomes that the overall company is trying to achieve. What are the main missions of the company and the organization? And that's a much easier way to relate it. And so this is the process of going much further beyond just the technical pieces of observing the health of a system. And so to take a little bit of an example, I'm going to go and shift gears now, and I'll pull up an example of this same process and how you can view it and measure it inside of Dynatrace from not only the technical perspective, but as we build up into the business KPIs, and those, of course, increase your business outcomes. So let's take a look here. Swap screens. And so what we can see here inside Dynatrace is there's an ability where you can take that exact process of starting from the online application and then working our way down to the layer of when the documents actually get checked. Are there any exceptions that happen? And again, these could be valid business exceptions, not technology problems. They could be things such as somebody didn't check the appropriate box, and so therefore we aren't running the appropriate check on them, and therefore their documents fail. Maybe they uploaded the wrong document because it wasn't very intuitive, and so therefore the document check failed. no technical IT problems in that vein, but there's an experience problem that's failing the onboarding of that new business. It's something we probably want to investigate and then maybe potentially improve upon, right? And so you can see this flow, and not only are we looking at it in a live and in real-time way, but we're able to determine how many are actually in flight, how many times have people dropped off at that particular step, or how many processes have dropped off, and which we could then investigate. And then what's the duration? How long does it actually take for this step to complete? So you can see as a credit check, which we're relying on a third party for, it could sometimes take between 1 and 2 hours for that to complete. So we're able to kind of go even further than that and view that full business flow on top of things. Now, if we want to go and look at this in a bit more detail here, what we could do is we can kind of put this on a singular dashboard where this gives us a holistic view of, are there, again, any IT issues, any of the technical problems, but more importantly, are we meeting our business KPIs? And as we saw previously, we are having some drop-offs, which we would potentially want to investigate. But now we're really looking at it and measuring. You see, most of these things that we're measuring here are not things such as application responsiveness or even things such as your infrastructure health, but we're looking specifically at those KPIs because ideally, if we're having a technical problem, these KPIs would then be impacted. And that's what we really care about because those drive the true business outcomes. And so putting all of this together where we have one cohesive view where we can measure business KPIs and the IT KPIs really make for a much more efficient organization and help even drive some more innovation and potential cost cutting. And so this is the type of thing we talk about a true observability platform is beyond just the standard technical data and the technical KPIs that we're trying to measure, but marrying them back to the true business outcomes. And this is an example of how Dynatrace particularly is a way to be able to do that, or how you can leverage the platform in order to accomplish those things.
All right. Thank you for that, Wayne. It's always good to see the inner workings of the machine there. So I really appreciate that deep dive into there. So I promised at the top of the conversation that we would get into talking about AI as it relates to observability. So I want to open this question up to everyone. How do you see AI, and in particular Gen AI, transforming the way that organizations manage their cloud posture? Wayne, let's start with you on this one.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that there's a couple different areas. Certainly, you can't get out of the conversation without talking about Gen AI these days. So I think organizations are they're at the point of going from, let's say, that kind of peak of expectations to now getting to the point of what can we do that's practical that will also help the business itself. And I think that's the thing that companies are finally starting to look at this as, is starting to look at it from less of the lens of the shiny new thing, but what can we do now from a business perspective that can do really two things. It can help us, drive revenue essentially, which is what we're trying to do, but also make sure that we're doing this in a responsible fashion, that we're not creating some sort of, let's say, security problem for ourselves. So we can adopt this in a responsible fashion. But we then also are using this to be able to generate revenue. And those are where I'm starting to see the conversations go, versus if we were to have talked about a year ago, it was probably a little bit different, where it was, people were at that excitement level of seeing all these different possibilities of things that they could do before actually trying to get their hands on it and achieve it. So I think we're getting to that point now.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's always good to keep the actual business case and business value there at the end of the tunnel. So that's a good reminder. Eric or Paul, do you have anything to add about what you're seeing as it relates to Gen AI?
I'll just a quick sort of comment on that. Obviously Gen AI is the hot topic, but I would say the biggest challenge I see in a lot of my clients is just the practical use of AI and machine learning in their telemetry data, right? In terms of getting the trend and the causal metrics and modeling in place so they can kind of do the predictive, basic statistical analysis and trend analysis of what's going on in their environment. I mean, obviously, Gen AI, I think, has, use cases in sort of what I would call in sort of the shift right observability context in terms of helping SREs identify ways to help them, identify root cause. Once they have root cause identified, then what do they actually have to do to fix it, right? In terms of what code fix they have to implement, what kind of change to their infrastructure. Gen AI is a great co-pilot in helping you do that. The shift left obviously helps you in terms of, optimizing and scaling your test automation, right? Being able to put test automation, generating tests through Gen AI also is very helpful. But I would say in terms of sort of, brass tacks, your basic observability, at least in context to technical and business to a certain extent, is get your basic, AI machine learning right and put that in context. And then you can start thinking about Gen AI in context of that sort of observability of your software development lifecycle.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. All right, Eric, anything to add?
Yeah, I think that Paul and Wayne, you really hit it. I think the only thing I'd add to it, and I think Wayne, Paul, you were touching on some of this. We've seen a massive rise in the value that code generators and code assistants are providing the developer communities, and that's not going away. They're going to get better. They're going to become just useful engines to really deliver not just impactful features and help developers drive more efficiency and how they can release and get things out from a features perspective more quickly, but the application to the actual SDLC and the observability layers, right? There's a lot of ways in which we can use these engines to really help compliance, help drive efficiency in the overall platform engineering and DevOps domains, help to even implement some of those disciplines that allow us, because a lot of DevOps is a very cultural transformation, help us to use those engines to really streamline some of the cultural appropriation which goes into that process. And then when I think about the observability piece, those coding assistants, again, are going to be able to create a lot more benefit, but also in some respects, a lot more code. And we need to be able to make sure that we're not, and I hear this from a lot of my customers, how are we guarding against legal indemnification? How do I know that that code can be accepted into the environment effectively? How do I know that it actually marries to the way that modern coding standards would want me to build, but has contextual awareness of the way we've been historically been building software through the history of our kind of institution? So being able to really marry those two layers, using AI to actually enhance posture and watch what's being created, but also really streamline a lot of the developer operations and the way at which developers can be more efficient, is really, we've seen, gone beyond very quickly just kind of, hey, this is interesting, to we need this, and this is going to be something we're going to be using in perpetuity. Now we need to make sure that we're using it in the most effective and compliant ways.
Great. Yeah, that important points there. Thank you for that. AI is such a hot topic, so it's hard not to talk about it. So I appreciate all your thoughts there. We have time for one last question before we jump into our Q&A. And this, again, we started out with a rapid fire round. I'd like to do another rapid fire question. So in one sentence, what is the most important action that financial services companies can take today to improve their cloud observability strategy? Wayne, let's start with you.
Yeah, I would say first thing is take inventory of all of the different solutions you have, which are probably many at this point. Take the inventory and then see how that aligns with what your overall strategy is for your business outcomes. And if there's a mismatch there, which where we're at today, in most cases there is, that's one area you ultimately need to focus on, because that is one way you will be able to trim down the excess that you have, or trim down the excess tools that you have, and then better align yourself to the business outcomes you want to achieve. Great.
All right, Eric?
Yeah, Wayne's spot on. Observability informs a baseline understanding of where we are, right? That baseline understanding is not the end point, it's actually the beginning, because incremental improvement of how we take advantage of cloud posture, platforms, and really the modernization that provides is critical. leaning into that observability layer and allowing that to inform the decisions we're taking, not just in how we create enhancements in the way that we're going to be building technology, but using it also as a way to actually start to identify what are the most impactful ways we can deliver for the line of business is really everything. And that's what's so exciting about some of the partnerships we have today. The teams on.
Great. Thanks. And Paul, your thoughts on call to action here?
Yeah, I've sort of alluded to this earlier, and I think it kind of, speaks to, the evolution of this space from being a simple monitoring and logging to now observability, right? Which is a new buzzword. I would say tie your observability capabilities as sort of a top tier capability. It needs to be a part of, all aspects of your reliability and resiliency program, and sort of start with that and sort of get in that almost the C-suite level in terms of attention and get that funding needed to kind of think through how the observability strategy fits into your overall technical strategy and how that's going to be an integral part of you going forward and being successful as a software provider and builder of capabilities going down the road. So really sort of making sure that you tie and elevate observability in the appropriate levels of the organization is what I would recommend.
All right, well, that brings us right into our Q&A session. Just as a reminder, we are doing Q&A in case you joined late, so feel free to pop your questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We have a few here, so I'll start with this one. And go ahead, whoever feels qualified to jump in. The first one is, what is a typical process organizations use to encourage adoption of observability solutions?
I mean, I'll jump in quickly, and then others can opine. But one of the things I've seen that's started to become successful is the emergence of the platform engineering topic, right? So again, it's not just a role, but it's basically the area of how are we going to put together some sort of internal development platform for our teams so that developers can focus on writing the applications or interacting with the AI chatbots like we talked about, but ultimately pumping out the code that they need for the applications without having to spend time trying to figure out how to set up or deal with observability. They just want to consume it to make their jobs better. And so that's one way I've seen that has been successful and where more companies are starting to go.
Any other thoughts on encouraging adoption? Well, yeah.
Sure, Wayne. I couldn't agree with you more. I think the other thing that I would think of, and in my lens, one of the kind of, again, back to that, not if, but when and how quickly can we move to a cloud provider, that is stimulating a conversation around, we need to look at our actual overall estate, right? From a delivery, from a development and observability and runtime perspective. And what's happening in that vector is we start realizing, wow, we have a lot of platforms that are doing this, right? There are a lot of things that we're taking advantage of. And our ability to streamline, triage, and cut through the most critical components of the data that's coming off observability is something that, again, when we inform or we talk about creating that level of baseline, is really where a lot of clients are going down the path. They're saying, look, we've grown up with a lot of this. That's great. But this is actually a really interesting time for us to take advantage of looking at that overall estate and make some decisions on how we can streamline. Because in the way that we're driving that level of streamlining, that actually allows us to become much more efficient in the way we actually are packaging, encapsulating, and utilizing all the components we need from a service layer to drive all of the efficiency, the agility, the innovation that we want to embark on. And we've seen a lot of customers from an observability lens take advantage of that kind of motion as a way to really look at that and inform those decisions.
All right, so we have about time for one more question here. How do you deal with the organizational complexity of financial institutions when it comes to adoption of a new category like this?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So ironically, I think what makes it even more challenging is it's not new. It's basically evolution of basically what was kind of a grunt area in terms of a low value or perceived low value area of the IT organization typically. I think, for me, I think it's about making sure that you put forward the value prop and that you sort of make it a self-service capability, right? And that means in terms of, because it really, good observability requires great interactions of the developers to understand how to instrument their apps, to understand what business metrics they may want to put into their log streams that are going to be captured in the actual observability tool that's going to surface it, or it may be just even the basic system metrics that you need to sort of run the infrastructure. And I think, providing what we work with clients a lot on is helping them think through, how do I build observability as a service platform? How do I provide a set of tools and capabilities that allows developers to use those easily and in self-service capacity? Therefore, then how do I get some quick wins with a few focus groups? And then once I get those quick wins, advertise those quick wins, and that becomes the way you advertise and market the service within the organization. Working with an organization right now, just sort of, thinking through their operating model in terms of, there's always going to be isolated hubs of siloed data, but how do you bring them into an enterprise level so that they can expose that data for everybody to use? Because chances are that siloed use of data is going to be a benefit for everybody within the organization. Obviously, there's cost reasons why you may not share that with everyone, but having the ability to flex in and out on a self-service basis will be very beneficial on that front. So that's how I would say adopting that and addressing the organizational complexity is by basically providing a great service everybody wants.
Great. All right. Thanks for that. And great advice to end on, starting small and building from there. That is all we have time for today. I want to thank you, our audience, and to thank also our panelists as well, to Paul, Eric, and Wayne. If you have any questions for our presenters, feel free to reach out to them on LinkedIn for specific questions. You'll also be receiving a follow-up email from Finovate with this recording. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.